Aside from changing the face of the elections, a milestone that happened during the 1950s was the active participation of citizens in watching the votes. For the first time, a group called the Citizens' National Electoral Assembly, a precursor of the National Movement for Free Elections or NAMFREL, served as an election watchdog.
They would focus on, let us say, voter registration, voter education, things like that.
The 1960s was marked by spikes in prices of consumer goods, shaky peace and order, and rampant graft and corruption. Riding on the promise of change and a better life, then young and popular Senator Ferdinand Marcos won the 1965 presidential elections against incumbent President Diosdado Macapagal. No other president had been re-elected that time, making Marcos eager to get re-elected in 1969.
Marcos spent $250 million of public funds, according to records, for this election, making it the dirtiest election, according to many people, in history.
Considered one of the dirtiest elections in history, the youth were frustrated by the outcome of the elections. January 26, 1970, the youth jolted the State of the Nation address of President Marcos at the Batasang Pambansa.
At nagkaroon ng malaking gulo. And that is, of course, the eve of what we call the first quarter storm.
Marcos declared martial law in September 21, 1972. In his bid to remain in power, a new constitution was passed, the 1973 Philippine Constitution.
Ratification of the 1973 Constitution was a show of hands. They would gather we're not yet born, they would gather, there would be what you call barangay assemblies, and the barangay captain would ask, who are in favor of, let us say, giving free education or whatever scholarship? You will have a lot of hands raised. So a photo will be taken and they will say, oh, they ratified it.
Magbual says, even the election body, the Commission on Elections, became a puppet of the dictator, and the people lost their faith in the electoral system. The ambush of Senator Benigno Aquino, the closest rival of Marcos, rekindled the electorate's embers of disgruntlement. People rose to the challenge of dethroning a dictator.
So that's how NAMFREL came about, to help regain the confidence of the people in the electoral process as a necessary step towards democratization.
Marcos called for a snap elections in 1986. It was a battle between Ferdinand Marcos and Ninoy Aquino's widow Corazon. Magbual recalls how the administration worked to manipulate the result of the election.
You would not believe it, one of the NAMFREL council members detected as many as 1,000 ghost barangays and villages. 1,000. And they have complete voters list. So there are ghost barangays with ghost voters list with ghost precincts.
Some COMELEC officials walked out because they were asked to encode falsified data during the national canvassing. The COMELEC declared Marcos the winner, but NAMFREL said it was Cory who won. After several days, with the voice of protests and defiance ringing, Filipinos sent a clear message to Marcos. Tama na, sobra na, palitan na. The world was captivated how Filipinos won freedom without spilling a single drop of blood. It was the first EDSA People Power Revolution. Flushed with fervor from the streets, people learned to trust the electoral system again. But elections are far from corruption-proof, an old sickness at the polls in a new time. In the 1995 elections, a dagdag-bawas system that manipulated election count was discovered.
You have to distinguish retail cheating from what they call wholesale cheating. Dagdag-bawas is a classic case of what you call wholesale cheating.
In 1998, Joseph Erap Estrada proved to be a political juggernaut, unstoppable in his march to presidential victory. 3 years after, on the strength of allegations of receiving wedding money and plunder, Estrada was unseated. Vice President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo was sworn in president. The 2004 presidential election was one for the books, as incumbent President Arroyo defeated popular movie star, the king of action movies Fernando Poe Jr. by more than 1 million votes. Cries of electoral fraud grew louder when a CD containing a purported conversation between President Arroyo and COMELEC Commissioner Virgilio Garciliano was exposed.
For the next years of her presidency, she was so marred by people believing that she stole the presidency not once but twice.
The era of manual elections ended in the 2010 presidential elections. For the first time, the national elections became automated, and then Senator Benigno Aquino III won by a huge margin from his closest rival, the post-President Joseph Estrada.
Tandaan natin, the more days you count, when you count these votes, mas maraming paraan at mas maraming pwedeng gawin para madaya ang resulta. And so, the faster that we know the counting, the results of the election, kung umaga pa lang alam na natin, mas kakaunti yung magiging ways to cheat. That's why I think yung PICOS machine ay nakatulong ng malaki na magkaroon ng overwhelming victory si President Noynoy Aquino. Well, in fact, he was not the candidate of the government.
For more than a century of elections in the country, from elitist to popular, from manual to automated elections, NAMFREL thinks the election system in the Philippines remained the same.
We have fallen behind our neighbors already. They have achieved more in making their elections more credible, more meaningful, more acceptable by the stakeholders, more free and fair.
For Magbual, our electoral system is far from perfect. The most important thing is for people to protect the vote, the true will of the electorate, for posterity. George Cahiles, Solar News.